Hey guys, it is 11:36. I'm sitting at my desk, what I would be doing about this time every day. And you guys would probably be finishing up reading, or you'd probably be finishing up with spelling or with Alabama history. And I was just thinking about y'all, and I thought, this will be a good time. And normally we would be getting ready for lunch in about 15 minutes, and we would come back and we'd watch a movie during lunch. So anyway, I thought I'm going to try to have this ready for you so you can watch it while you have your lunch. Anyway, so so the author is Kate DiCamillo. So that means she wrote the book, The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. And you notice how, remember, all of the letters here are capitalized. So every letter in the beginning, every first letter in the title of each book is capitalized. So remember, we said whenever you're writing it, that the title of the book, then you underline it, and that lets us know that it's the title of the book when you're reading it. And so remember, we were talking about the setting and the characters and the purpose of the author writing this. So the setting started out in the Tulane household, and then it moved from the ship, or moved to the ship, and then the bottom of the ocean. And now Edward, he is no longer at the bottom of the ocean, because what happened? Well, a fisherman's net came down and swooped him up, and he landed on the deck of the ship. And while he was there on the ship, Lawrence, the fisherman, decided, I think I'll take him home to Nellie. He calls her Nell too. And so he puts him on top of his shoulder and he walks him home. Only when they get home, they don't see Edward as a boy rabbit. They see him as a girl rabbit. Remember, we've been talking about Edward's ego. We said he had a really, really big ego. And an ego is kind of how you see yourself and how you think about yourself. So Edward, he was in love with himself pretty much. He was very vain, V-A-I-N, that's a word. Not like the vein in your arm, that's V-E-I-N. He was very vain. In other words, he loved himself, and he thought he was all that in a bag of chips. And he loved himself, we could tell by the way that the author described him in the first several chapters. He said he had on top hats. He had his very own pocket watch. He had on fancy suits. Everything was pressed. And so he thought he was all that in a bag of chips. And so things started happening to Edward. Bad things started happening. Remember when the cleaning lady found him and she wanted to put him out of the way, and so she put him in Abilene's closet. And not only did she just put him in the closet, she didn't bother sitting him up. And so this made Edward mad. It made him angry. And it really got to his ego, didn't it? Because she left him how? His nose was face down on his knees. And so now, all right, so they decided to go, after that happened, they decided they were going on a trip to London. And they were on the ship. And then remember, on the ship, they met two boys, and the boys were tossing Edward back and forth. And then Abilene was desperate, trying to get Edward back, and she accidentally tripped the boy over, and Edward went sailing through the air. So Edward wound up being at the bottom of the ocean for almost a year. And so he kept thinking Abilene would come back. But remember what happened right before? They stripped him down naked. And he was bare skinned to the world. And he thought that would have been the worst thing that would ever happen. Until he went flying through the air, hit the ocean, and then sank. But him being at the bottom of the ocean was a very tragic thing that happened. And something that really humbled him. And so that the humbleness was good for him, because it did what to his ego? It didn't really destroy his ego, but it did do a lot of, I guess, it softened him up a lot, and he was not so vain. He only thought about himself. He never thought about anybody else, did he? Never, not once. He kept thinking that Abilene would come back. And then He didn't just want to see Abilene, he wanted to see anybody. So, now, here we are, chapter 9. Let me show you chapter 8, just to kind of give you a visual of where we were. So, here we met Lawrence, and this is Lawrence taking Edward home. You can see what he looked like after he's got seaweed on him. Bless his little heart. And he doesn't have any clothes on, so Lawrence has no way of knowing that it's a boy rabbit and not a girl rabbit. And then here is Nellie, and Nellie is looking, thinking, oh, what a beautiful rabbit, thinking it was a girl rabbit. She thought Edward was beautiful. Well, now look, here's Edward in a dress. Think about how vain he is and how he looked at me, how he thought about his clothes and how handsome he thought he was, and he never thought of anybody else. He only worried about himself. How do you think it's going to make him feel now that he has been put in a dress by Lawrence and Nellie? And so Edward Tulane became Susanna. Nellie sewed several outfits for him: a pink dress with ruffles for special occasions, a simple shift fashioned out of a flower-covered cloth for everyday use, and a long white gown made of cotton for Edward to sleep in. In addition, she remade his ears, stripping them the few pieces of fur that remained and designing him with a new pair. Remember, that was real fur that was on his ears. How do you think that made him feel? Oh, she told him when she was done, you look so lovely. He was horrified at first. He was, after all, a boy rabbit. He did not want to be dressed as a girl. And the outfits, even the special occasion dress, were so simple and so plain. Remember, he was used to having Italian suits that were tailor-made for him, and this definitely was not tailor-made. So can you imagine what that did to his ego? They lacked the elegance and artistry of his real clothes, but then Edward remembered lying on the ocean floor, the muck in his face, the stars so far away, and he said to himself, what difference does it make, really? Wearing a dress won't hurt me. Besides, life in the little green house with the fisherman and his wife was sweet. Nellie loved to bake, and so she spent her day in the kitchen. She put Edward on the counter and leaned up against the flour canister and arranged his dress around his knees. She bent his ears so that he could hear well. And then she set to work kneading dough or bread and rolling out dough for cookies and pies. The kitchen soon filled with the smell of baking bread and with the sweet smells of cinnamon and sugar and cloves. The window steamed up, and while Nellie worked, she talked. She told Edward about her children, her daughter Lolly, who was a secretary, and her boys Ralph, who was in the army, and Raymond, who died of pneumonia when he was only 5 years old. He drowned inside of himself, said Nellie. It's a horrible, terrible thing, the worst thing to watch somebody you love die right in front of you and not be able to do nothing about it. I dream about him most nights. Nellie wiped at her tears with the back of her hand, so she smiled at Edward. I suppose you think I'm daft, talking to a toy, but it seems to me that you're listening, Susanna. And Edward was surprised to discover that he was listening. Before, when Abilene talked to him, everything had seemed so boring and so pointless, but what do you think changed? See, before, when he had Abilene, he didn't really care what she had to say because he just took for granted that she was always going to be there. And so then, when he was at the bottom of the ocean for almost a year, those 200 and some odd days, he didn't have anybody to talk to. And he kind of got lonely, didn't he? And so that loneliness humbled him. And so it softened his ego a little bit, didn't it? But now the stories that Nellie told struck him as the most important thing in the world, and he listened as if his life depended on what she said. It made him wonder if some of the muck from the ocean floor had gotten inside his china head and damaged him somehow. In the evening, Lawrence came home from the sea, and there was dinner, and Edward sat at the table with the fisherman and his wife. He sat in an old wooden high chair, and while at first he was mortified, a high chair, after all, was designed for babies, not for elegant rabbits. He soon became used to it. He liked being up high, looking out over the table instead of staring at the tablecloth as he had at the Tulane household. He liked feeling like he was a part of things. Every night after dinner, Lawrence said that he thought that he would go out and get some fresh air, and maybe that Susanna would come back with him. He placed Edward on his shoulder as he had the first night when he walked him through town, bringing him home to Nellie. Then they went outside, and Lawrence lit his pipe and held Edward there on his shoulder. And if the night was clear, Lawrence said the names of the constellations one at a time: Andromeda, Pegasus, pointing at them with the stem of his pipe. Edward loved looking up at the stars, and he loved the sounds of the constellation names. They were sweet in his ears. Sometimes, though, staring up at the sky, Edward remembered Pellegrina. Edward remembered Pellegrina. Saw her again, her dark and glowing eyes, and a chill would go through him. Warthogs, he would think. Witches. But Nellie, before she could put him to bed each night, sang Edward a lullaby, a song about a mockingbird that did not sing, and a diamond ring that would not shine. And the sound of Nellie's voice soothed the rabbit, and he forgot about Pellegrina. Life for a very long time was sweet, and then Lawrence and Nellie's daughter came for a visit. I wonder what that means. You'll have to come back tomorrow and find out. Here is a little hint to make you come back. It's a high chair, chapter 10. Let's see what happens. I'll see you tomorrow. I love you.